Alright, today we're going to be putting some new O2 sensors on the Cobra. So I bought Ford replacements. These are upstream, meaning the ones that come first when it's coming off of the engine. These are the front O2 sensors. The rears have been turned off in the tune, which is somewhat common when you have your car tuned. You'll usually just turn the rears off. So this is the part number right here for the upstream ones. And something that I wanted to mention, when you get these brand new, they're going to have some anti-seize that was on the threads. So it's going to look like they've been used, or you're going to find this black powder type stuff in there, but it's normal. As you can see, the sensors are new, they've never been run. So just be aware of that. So the real reason I'm actually changing the O2 sensors on this car, they're really not bad on the Cobra, but on my Mach 1 it has an SCT tune on it. Seems to be running pretty rich, and it eats the O2 sensors a little prematurely. So anyway, I'm just taking the ones off of this car because this car only has 42,000 miles on it and they were still working just fine. And since this car kind of sits and only is driven on the weekends and such, it's better just to put the new parts on here and then burn up another pair of O2 sensors on the other car. I'm going to read the check engine code that came up. So I've gone over to read DTC, turn key on, do not start the engine. So I've done that. And two of these have come up. The first one on this just happens to be one saying readiness not complete, so we don't really care about that one. It's the second code that we're looking at here. And it's the P0133. Okay, and this says O2 with slow response on bank 1 sensor 1. So in this case, this is the first sensor, which is the upstream sensor, and bank 1 is the passenger side on this car, and bank 2 is would be the driver's side. The only tool we're going to be using, other than what's needed to jack the car up and put it on jack stands, is this 7/8 inch wrench. And the process is pretty straightforward. We're just going to unplug the old one, put the wrench on here, unscrew the sensor, then screw the new sensor back in and plug it back in. So one thing you can do also, if you still have a check engine light afterwards and you don't have a handheld tuner, you can either take it to a parts store and they can usually turn the code back off, or you can unplug the battery for about 10 minutes and it should reset. Okay, so I've put the car up on a jack stand here. Let me show you. And I like to put it on the subframe connector. Most cars don't have these. If you have them installed, it's a really nice place to lift, but you can still lift where that subframe connector does mount to the car. It's a nice place there, and I like to keep the jack under here as well, just in case anything were to happen. We just have two things that are going to keep the car from coming down on us. Okay, under the hood here, I'm just going to remove the negative battery terminal. And it's always a good idea to do that, just because we are messing with some electronics on the car, and you never know when you trip the starter or something and spark something and blow something. So anyway, it's always just a good idea to take the negative battery terminal off, make sure it's not touching anything, nothing's going to touch here, and go from there. So here we are under the car. There's the oil pan as a point of reference. Here's a transmission. And off to the side here, here's the exhaust pipe that's coming down from the engine. So basically you just want to follow that up as you make your way back up to the exhaust manifolds, and you will find your upstream O2 sensors, one on each side. So in this case, I don't have any other catalytic converters up here. Those can sometimes get in the way and make this a little tricky. But the first thing we're going to want to do up in here is follow the connector up there to the top, and we're going to want to unplug it. Once it's unplugged, then we can put our 7/8 inch wrench on here, and just unscrew the sensor. Okay, so I've removed the sensor by unplugging it. It's really easy how this works. There's just this little tab that you push down on the back here. And then I'd strongly recommend using both hands, one hand on this side of the plug and then your other hand on the other, and then separate them. So it's going to be really tempting for you just to push that switch and yank on it. But if you do that, you're kind of messing with where the sensor plugs in, and you really don't want to do that. So up here now, all we have to do is put our wrench up here, our 7/8 inch wrench, and just break this loose. Loosen this back up by pulling down on it. Okay. Shouldn't take too long, too much force, and if you have anti-seize on this, it's really not bad at all. So once that's broken loose, we just continue to unscrew this. As you can see, the sensor's now been removed, so we're just going to put some anti-seize on the threads of the O2 sensor, the new one, and just screw it back into the pipe, and then just plug it back in to the connector up top. Here's the new sensor out of the package, and as you can see, it already has the anti-seize there on the threads, so we're good to go just to screw this one back in. From what I could see, the O2 sensors were the same for all the cars, all of the 99 to 04 Mustangs, at least for the V8s. So here's the new sensor going in. So once again, it had anti-seize on it, so I just started threading it. Everything's looking good. Just make sure you have it twisting and turning before you plug it back in, so you're not twisting the wires. And just get it good and snug on there with your 7/8 inch wrench. Okay, so there, that's pretty much tight there. You want a good seal on it with that washer, so you don't want any exhaust leaks. Now all we have to do though is plug it back up in. So you'll just look at the tip of it here and try to line it up the best that you can. Now it is pretty tied up in there, and you may not be able to see the sensor. You might have to plug it back in by hand, but the sensor that you're plugging this into looks very similar to this. It has the ridge at the top, so that's how you'll know it, which way to line it up. So just make sure that the little top rectangular part like this is matching up to the one up there, and when you slide it in, you'll hear it click. It's a little hard to see, but this is where we're unplugging the sensor from. So as you can see, it has the receiving end of where that little clip goes. Okay, so now to line this up, as you can see, this is the way that the sensor plugs in. They should look kind of the same. You have that rectangular part right here at the top, and then you're gonna do the same thing with this rectangular part here. It's kind of a little difficult to see, but right here, that rectangular part is going to match up with the rectangular part there. But you just want to line both of those up together. Line up the little mark there. Okay, so I have it ready to click together. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's kind of tight in here. But then when you push them together, you'll hear it click. There you go. So when you hear that sound, you know it's clicked together. So now I'm going to move over to the driver's side and do the same thing. I'm going to unplug the sensor first, then unscrew it with the 7/8 inch wrench, then screw the new sensor back in, and then plug it back in. And just get it good and snug. There you go. Now just reattach your negative battery terminal, and you're good to go. So now that I've replaced the sensor, I'm going to go over to clear the DTC, and now it's been cleared. So that check engine light should not come on again for this system. Now when you first start your car up, it's going to revert back to some preset parameters. So the car's not really listening to what the O2s are saying. That's going to be called open loop. And then once the car's kind of warmed up for a minute, you start driving around, then the car will start getting feedback from the O2 sensors, and then it'll make ignition timing and fuel adjustments. And that's kind of how the car will run most efficiently. But also when you go wide open throttle, then it's also going to go to open loop, and it's not going to be listening to what the O2s are saying. It's just going back to preset parameters to make sure that under those circumstances the car isn't going to run lean. It's going to be running off of what it's set to do in from the factory, or from a new tune that you've given the car. So once again, the O2 sensors are only really listening to what the car and the engine is saying when you're driving around normally, and it's in closed loop. Then it's making adjustments to the ignition timing, fuel, all that kind of thing. So once you floor it, or when the car first starts up, it's not really listening to the O2 sensors. It's just going off of preset parameters, and that's why you will sometimes have your car run just fine when you first start it up, or when you're under full acceleration, and then just driving around normally it'll act up with the bad O2 sensors. And something that I wanted to mention as well is when my O2s were going bad on this car, the O2 sensor was giving false readings and telling me I had a lean condition and I had a rich condition, and all these different things that threw me down different paths looking to try to resolve the problem. But that's just something to remember, is that the sensor itself, if it goes bad, it might give you false readings. And so sometimes you have to throw parts at the car until you can properly diagnose it, because sometimes you won't get that check engine light saying that it's the O2 that's bad. It could be the O2 giving you a false reading.